All right, well, people, you've heard of the process with Justin Smith of Touchdown Alabama Magazine. You heard our own Patrick Dow with Pat Reacts. You also heard yours truly, Stephen M. Smith of In My Own Words. But now the gang are all together with this new show, this new podcast called The Bang. Your Crimson Tide football, getting this thing started here on a Monday, 4th of July weekend. Fellas, I know I'm on the road heading back from Texas, but how are you guys doing?
I'm doing pretty good, Steven.
I'm doing great. Back home right now, seeing the family, just like everyone else is doing on this great holiday. So, just enjoying the time I got.
Yeah,
Absolutely. What? Go ahead, Justin.
hey, you good? I was telling them that you may lag out here and there with you being on the road.
I can hear you guys now coming through Louisiana, so it's crazy.
Yeah, you good. But yeah, I was telling them that we're going to discuss a couple of different things, including the whole Pete Golding discussion. I know you brought up the question of is Alabama fans too judgmental of the way that he has handled the defense coordinator position. Well, you can lead off the discussion by talking about how you feel about the situation.
Oh yeah. So I mean, we had a show on Monday, and a fan called in, Elijah from Jersey, a really good fan call right there, and he was just talking about how, in his opinion, Pete Golding has done all that he can do in a sense of he may not be the biggest fan of Pete Golding, but at the same time, it's does Alabama have the athletes that it had at one point in time under Kirby Smart and Jeremy Pruitt, or was it the fact that it wasn't necessarily that Pruitt and Kirby Smart were tremendous coordinators, but the guys they had just that dog mentality defensively. So, I mean, my thought is, are we being, as consumers of Bama football, are we being unfair? Are we being too judgmental? Or is this really Pete Golding's proven year just because of he's been in the program now 5 years and this is his fourth year as a defensive coordinator. So, Pat, how do you see this? Are people being unfair, or is this really okay? Pete's got to come with it now.
I kind of think, and I've always been pretty consistent about this. I do think Pete Golding gets treated pretty unfairly in terms of his job as a defensive coordinator, just because the standards at Alabama were set so high from guys like Kirby Smart, who was there from 2008 to 2015, and is obviously one of the best defensive coaches in all of college football. So when your standard is, hey, you got to be Kirby Smart level, I just don't think that's very realistic. And don't you guys think about how there's so much turnover on the coaching staff every single year for Alabama? Don't you kind of think Alabama fans would kind of be happy with some stability, someone hanging around for like Pete Golding for 4 or 5 years here?
I mean,
So I just
I mean, Pat,
go ahead, Steve.
I would say so. I would say so because normally when you look at a coach at Alabama, they're here, 1 to 2 years, maybe 3 years, then they're whisked away to another job, whether it's a different college job or an NFL job. So to have Pete Golding here concretely going on his fifth year, I mean, that should be a good thing.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And look, the Kirby Smart is one in a million. I feel like as a defensive coach. Look at the team they just put together last year. It was one of the best defenses we've seen statistically. And although Jeremy Pruitt, I think, is a really good defensive coordinator, I mean, he had some some dogs to work with. And I think from what
he had
the
some
talent
freaks.
that Pete
He had freaks. Okay,
yeah,
he had some freaks.
I mean, if you look back on that like 2015 defense, there's probably like 8 or 9 NFL draft picks alone on that side of the ball.
Yeah.
So when you
Yeah.
look at Pete Golding, this is probably the most talented group that he's had to work with, because I think people forget that 2019 group was, it wasn't the typical Alabama defensive personnel that we're used to seeing. And now Alabama has guys like Will Anderson, Harry To'oTo'o, the secondary all coming back, some 5-star players everywhere. So I think that this year Pete Golding's really set up to make that big jump that I think everyone's really looking for. But that's not to say that I think he's actually performed pretty well as a defensive coordinator, especially when you're looking across his statistics in the SEC.
Justin. What do you think about that? I know from the recruiting end, Pete Golding's doing a bang up good job out there. When you talk to the young athletes, they say, I love Coach Pete. He my guy. I vibe with him. So from a recruiting aspect, I think people are very happy with him. But I guess, Justin, what's your take from the coaching aspect?
Well, I definitely agree with you on that. The way that he recruits is definitely special. He's a special recruiter, and I pretty much agree with a lot of what Pat had to say. I think it is sort of unfair at times just based on the standard that Alabama has set and the amount of talent that was on some of those defenses that Kirby Smart and Jeremy Pruitt coached. I remember me and John, actually our producer, we were at the studio. I think we were wrapping up the process. We were talking about some of those past defenses, especially along the defensive front, because that is the area where I feel Kirby Smart and Jeremy Pruitt had a realistic. You can see the difference in the amount of talent that he had along defensive front compared to the guys that Alabama currently has on their roster. We went back and looked at that dominant defense Alabama had at once upon a time. It was like, who was going to make the play? It was like, someone is going to make the play here, but who along this defensive front is going to make it? You got Jonathan Allen, you got Tim Williams, who seemed to make a play every third down when it was third and long. Seemed as if that was his specialty. You had guys who sort of flew under the radar when you look at Deshaun Hand and Ryan Anderson. So that defensive front that Kirby Smart and Jeremy Pruitt had in the past were definitely special. It is proven because most of those guys are making a lot of money in the NFL now. When you take a look at Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne, so I think that the Crimson Tide are going to continue to try to recruit that defensive line group better in the future to get those type of guys back into the building. But I don't think the guys that they currently have on their roster at the moment match up to those guys, specifically along the defensive front. And I also look at the challenges that Pete Golding has had to face as Alabama's defensive coordinator, specifically when he had to start two freshman linebackers and play most of the season with those guys. So I think he has had some challenges. I think it does go back to what you said, Pat, the standard. But specifically, a group, if I had to point out, where Jeremy Pruitt and Kirby Smart had the advantage over Pete Golding was along the defensive front, in my opinion.
So stick with that, Justin, because you bring up a good point right there on the recruiting aspect. Can you tell early on whether it's junior, senior year, maybe even sophomore year of high school, where a guy could have that potential to be that type of player on the defensive line? Is it easy to tell, or is it hard to evaluate?
In terms of being physical, as people like to say, having that dog in them, you could tell that the first time you see a guy. So you either have that or you do not have that. It's something that is natural, part of your game. Even though you do not probably have the technique, you may need to work on your technique, your stance, or your get off. You need to work on the technical side of things. But if that is in you, that is in you, point blank. Period. I think a guy who comes to my mind when I think about that is Curtis Perry. I remember the first time I saw him play at Park Crossing High School when they took on Carver Montgomery a couple years back. It was one of the most physical high school football games I've ever seen. I think the first play he knocked the quarterback's helmet off when he made a sack. So he's one of those physical guys. And I think when a guy has that dog in him, he has that physical mentality. I think you see that as soon as the first time you see a guy. Sometimes some guys can work and develop into that, especially when you look at younger guys who are still maybe a bit timid, still trying to adjust to the game, probably eighth or ninth grade year. But I say from 10th, 11th, and 12th, if you are a dog, I think it is going to show.
Yeah, and sticking with the recruiting aspect, I'm not sure if they're, and I think Justin can speak more to this, but it always felt like those old Alabama teams always had, 3 or 4 or 5 star ready players ready to go. And when you look at some of these defensive lines, the rotations were just like 6, 7, 8 guys. It was so deep. But when you just look at the level of coaching in the SEC now, I think, at least in my opinion, Alabama is still going to have very highly ranked recruiting classes for the foreseeable future as long as Nick Saban is there. But just the level of coaching from the rest of the conference has risen. Look, you have Kirby Smart at Georgia, you got Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M, and Lane Kiffin, Mike Leach, Sam Pittman's even good. Even has turned out way better than people thought he would. But I just think, and now Brian Kelly at LSU, all these other names are coming to mind now. But I just think that the level of the conference has risen so much that you're not going to be 4 or 5 deep at every position anymore. I think it's going to be harder and harder to put together these long stretches of elite defenses. or offenses, really.
So my last thought here, and both of you guys can kind of answer this question defensively before we move on here. Do you think NIL has played a role in any of this? And I'm saying that those defenses back then with Kirby Smart, Jeremy Pruitt, and those players, all those players lived together. They all lived at Bryant Hall. They all ate the same steak, the same lobster, the same meal. They all roomed together. They're all in the same dorm together. I had what you had what I had. Nobody had any more than anybody else. And they were all going after that one goal, which was the NFL bag. Now with NIL, and you're having all of these businesses, organizations, third-party people in here, you have some, kids coming into a program making, $8-9 million per collective for NIL, and you have other kids coming in here with nothing. Some of those guys might think, okay, do I really have to go that hard because I've already got, a little bag already on me? I mean, do y'all see NIL playing a role in that, or is that just completely not the case for you guys?
I don't know. I think it's still so young for me to even really consider how much of an impact NIL is going to have, because, Alabama handles it much differently than the other schools in the SEC. And I think it's just still an ever changing thing in college football that, I don't think anyone really quite understands how to handle it, or even the players. So I'm not really sure that I could even say that would be a factor. It very well could be, but it's still so young. I can't really say to really put my mind to it.
Yeah, I feel similar to Pat, especially from the recruiting aspect. NIL is still like very new. I think a lot of parents and recruits are kind of tiptoeing around the situation because it seemed as if some guys are getting these big deals that you see on Twitter. This recruit get paid so and so millions of dollars, but it's like if you are a recruit's parent, how do you even bring up that conversation? Because it is still a very new aspect of the recruiting process. So I think it's something that we're definitely going to see play out better in the future. But it's so new; things are still in the air at the moment in terms of how the rules will possibly be in the future. So I think we'll have a better understanding and a clear I guess a clear understanding of how it really impacts it.
Okay, so speaking, guys, of crazy conversation, if you're just checking out the show, this is the Bama Elite here, a podcast with my guys, Justin Smith, lead scout and recruiting analyst for TDA, and the man Patrick Down right here, writer for TDA as well. So, fellas, I don't know about y'all, but I know I was able to look at USC and UCLA both deciding to leave the Pac-12 and go to the Big Ten. I mean, that was crazy right there. But then I saw this crazy graphic just strolling through social media, and the graphic was, 4 ACC teams. I think it was Florida State, Clemson, Virginia Tech, and North Carolina. And it goes potential candidates for the SEC. And I'm like, what the world is this? So, I mean, we already know Texas and Oklahoma are coming in from the Big 12 to the SEC within the next 2 to 3 years or so, and that's going to put the conference at like a 16-team super conference spot. I mean, does the SEC take in more? I mean, I know the slogan is it just means more, but does the SEC really take in more teams?
I mean, if more teams means more money, then yeah, they will take in as many teams as they can, and especially when you're bringing up teams like Clemson and for Florida State, any of these traditionally good programs, even recently, or even like a North Carolina, who's improved a lot in football over the past several years. I mean, yeah, I think this is just kind of where, another, just like NIL, it's college football's going through a whole lot of changes. It's not going to be the college football that the three of us watched growing up. So I
Now,
think,
now,
go ahead.
so I think, Pat, the only team from the ACC that I would be like, okay, if they join, this could be fun, would be Clemson, just due to going back to the 2019 championship game off the 18 season where Tua Tagovailoa wasn't fully healthy the whole year, and You go out there to Santa Clara for the national championship game, and Bama gets beat 44-16, and you still have fans with a bad taste in their mouths from that situation there. So I would like to see Clemson in the conference just for that rematch. Florida State would be intriguing. North Carolina would be too. Virginia Tech, if Frank Beamer was still there, maybe. But I would like to see Clemson just due to, Alabama could play that revenge card from that 2019 title game.
Yeah, I think it definitely is crazy, like you said, Steven, especially how the conferences are starting to change. Almost looks as if it's the old NCAA game. You basically can customize your conferences, and just looking at specifically everything that's going on right now.
Now I tried that on the game, Justin, customizing the HBCUs. That didn't work.
But yeah, specifically like the Big Ten, you see USC and UCLA teams on the West Coast, which is really confusing. I know, like you said, Pat, when we grew up, I think throughout the history of college football, most of the conferences have been basically designed around where your school is located, and I think it's really interesting that USC, UCLA, some West Coast teams are interested in joining the Big Ten, but with Oklahoma and Texas going to join the SEC in the future, I think nothing is off the table because those were two of the biggest college football brands in college football joining the SEC. I don't think anything is off the table at the moment. I think we're just going to continue to see that craziness.
Yeah, I mean, we grew up in an age where geography mattered, and with USC, and UCLA going to the Big Ten, clearly doesn't anymore. So,
yes. So Pat,
who knows where this is going to go?
So P Money, what you're telling me is social studies lied to me my whole life. That's what you're saying.
College football, it's not going to matter.
Social studies lied to me my whole life, but to me, I think it's big for television contracts. To me, television contracts, TV ratings, a whole lot of revenue share, and then also think of it like this: maybe for USC and UCLA, bigger recruiting, right? Because I mean, the West Coast, yes, they do a fine job recruiting, but once you dip into that Big Ten range, that dips into more of those TV ratings, and that dips into more, areas you feel like you could have more of a pull in recruiting. I mean, here's a reason why Texas and Oklahoma trying to join the SEC. You look at Oklahoma, you look at Texas with Steve Sarkisian. Sark already a footprint in the SEC, being Alabama's offensive coordinator for a couple of years. He's trying to get more so of that recruiting pool there. So I think definitely TV contracts, definitely revenue share, and maybe for USC and UCLA purposes, join the Big Ten, maybe getting a bigger foot in recruiting.
Yeah, I mean, I think recruiting and television is going to be a big part of it because, I mean, look, if you're a recruit, would you rather play at 11 o'clock at night in the Pac-12 where no one's going to watch, or would you rather be on big noon kickoff against Ohio State? So right. I think that's all going to.
Good point.
Yeah, I think that television is probably the driving force behind all this kind of conference movement.
Yeah, of course, the television market is definitely going to play a huge role in it, just based on the amount of matchups, high powerful, high profile matchups that you're going to have throughout the season. I think that is going to be something that is really interesting, and if things keep going on the path that it seems like it is going, it could be a situation where it may not see too many cupcake games. You may have one cupcake game if you're lucky. So it'll be interesting to see how each program's conference lines up first off, because I think if you keep adding teams to the conference, you may see different conferences break up different ways. I know the SEC has the West and East at the moment, but if they continue to add teams, it may be divided up a little bit more. So that will be interesting. It'll also be interesting to see how team schedules start to change. Are we going to see less cupcake games, just high intense matchups throughout the season from week 1 to the end of the season?
So here's a thought that I had, guys, before we get into, because a lot of things have been going on in recruiting here for Alabama, but I know everybody is sort of hyped up for the Texas A&M game on October 8th in Tuscaloosa, but if there was another game for Alabama that you have highlighted and you're thinking, okay, this one could be really fun, what's that other game?
A&M. I mean, come on, it's Texas A&M. It's got to be right.
I mean, after A&M.
After A&M, excuse. I thought you just said Texas. My bad.
Yeah. I think for me it may be Texas just based on what's surrounding the game. I know there's still a lot of question marks on their side of things, but the whole Steve Sarkisian thing, a lot of former Alabama players have transferred to Texas, so it'll be interesting to see that matchup again. Just seeing both of those teams with a rich college football history going up against one another during the regular season. So I think that's a matchup I'm intrigued in terms of watching it. I can't really say much about like the whole X's and O's and why this team would win over that team now at this point. I'm in the off season, but I think just everything surrounding the game is something to be excited about.
Yeah, so I'm with you on Texas. If I was to pick another one, probably LSU, just because Brian Kelly. There's some weird stuff that went on with him and his recruiting videos and the dancing and all whatnot. Whether the culture fit, but I'm fascinated to see how his LSU team's gonna look.
I'll say this. I'm really intrigued by Sam Pittman in Arkansas. I really am. I mean, after what Coach Pittman was able to do last year with the Hogs, and that team with KJ Jefferson, the success that they had, with KJ Jefferson coming back, and then with Arkansas also getting Drew Sanders from Alabama defensively, and then that game being in Fayetteville and going back to Fayetteville, that game with Arkansas is going to be very fun to watch.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see how KJ Jefferson develops. So I know they lost Traylon Burks, and I think Alabama's happy to see him go based off what he did to their defense last year.
Look, Josh Jobe is happy to see that man gone.
Yeah, I think Pete Golding probably is too. But yeah, I think that's just as good of a pick because that team has a lot of momentum, especially when expectations were pretty low for his first 2 years, and then Sam Pittman pretty much exceeded them.
Absolutely. So we can now get into the news that's been really killing it, and that's been on the recruiting trail, Justin. I mean, I don't know if you've gotten the chance to come up for air yet, dude, because it's like every other day or every other hour, you're dropping something, man, on recruiting, and whether it's Tony Mitchell, whether it's Brayson Hubbard, whether it's it doesn't matter who it is. It's like every week a new guy signs. And today, the young man that was recently committed to Georgia, decommitted, comes to Alabama. Between the months of June and now we're in July, Justin, this is crazy. It's like who's next? Is the Vickers kid next? Like who's next here?
Yeah, well, as far as who is next, I think everyone's attention is going to be on Malik Benson, the JUCO wide receiver at Hutchinson Community College on tomorrow as he announces his commitment on decision. He's a guy who officially visited Alabama during the month of June. Alabama looks to be in a good position with them, so we'll see how that plays out. I think the Tide could possibly land him. But as far as Alabama's recruiting success over the last few weeks, yeah, you said it, Steven. Seems like every other day they are picking up a new commit, picking up a lot of momentum with other guys. I think it is a combination of guys wanting to announce their commitments before their senior seasons begin. So if you just look across the recruiting landscape across college football, several top tier teams are getting recruits pretty much at the same pace Alabama is getting them at the moment. And I think this is all sort of a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, which we saw where recruits were not able to visit schools for over a year, 15 months. They were not able to get out to go enjoy the full recruiting process, did not take official visits. Now we see that guys, when they basically resumed taking official visits, everybody ran to schools to take official visits in June.
I just kind of want your thoughts on this. I mean, there were a lot of people that were I mean, seriously freaking out when Arch Manning decided to take his recruitment to Texas and join Steve Sarkisian. Now, of course, Alabama's got a commitment from Eli Holstein, a four-star from Louisiana. There's still an opportunity that Dylan Larnigan, the young man from Georgia, could commit also. We're waiting to see what he does. But for the people that may have been kind of jumping out of windows and freaking out about, oh no, Arch Manning's not coming to Bama, could you kind of speak to, how I think he went for the bet to the best place for himself, but I still think Alabama's in a good thing there with Holstein and potentially if it can get Dylan Larnigan.
Taking a look at them possibly landing Dylan Lonergan. Lonergan is set to announce his commitment on July 12th, I believe. Four-star quarterback out of Georgia who officially visited Alabama in June. He said that when he visited Alabama, he was a bit worried heading into that visit with Alabama having a commitment from Eli Holstein. So I definitely can see why he would feel that way. But after that official visit, he said he is not as worried about the Crimson Tide having Eli Holstein. They still wanted him as their second quarterback. I don't think they need a second quarterback, but they will take one if it is a guy like Dylan Lonergan who they have recruited really well, really well. So that is how I feel about Arch Manning and him committing to Texas. Not a huge surprise. The Longhorns did a really good job of recruiting him. Seems like he was one of those guys too who wanted to get the recruiting process behind him. And something that's really interesting about his recruitment is that a lot of fans are saying like whenever he posted whenever anything was posted about him, because he literally did not post anything, they were like too much drama. uh, how can it be drama when he hasn't said a single word? He hasn't tweeted out a single tweet. When he committed, that was his first ever tweet.
Yeah, and it was a heck of a first tweet. Hey, your first step on social media, you're announcing where you're going to go to college for the next 4 years. But I think with Steven hopping off here to take care of his business, it
Yeah,
might be as good a time as any to wrap things up here. Justin,
yeah.
you got the process twice a week. Got anything else coming for us? I know you got another big week in recruiting coming up.
Yeah, definitely another big. I think the rest of this month will continue to be a big one. We'll definitely check on Steven. He will have an update for you guys when I'm pretty sure when he comes back for his show. But yeah, recruiting is going to continue to be pretty big for the Crimson Tide in the future. Big month coming up. Yeah, the process will continue to come out on our YouTube channel, of course. With July moving forward, I know Alabama is getting closer and closer to the season. High school football is getting closer and closer to their football season, which is why some guys are going to choose to commit. Also mean I will get an opportunity to hit the road a little bit more. We have some camps coming up. I know the Future 50 in Orlando, Florida is one of those camps that I am going to go to later this month, where I will see some of the top targets in the 2023 recruiting class in person in a camp setting, and see some more guys during the 7-on-7 circuit with their team throughout the month as well. So it'll be interesting to see how things shake up. But yeah, we are good to wrap it up now, Pat.
All right, good stuff. I know SEC media days are right around the corner. I mean, Alabama football is every week's getting a little bit closer to coming back. So hang in there, guys.
Hey, yeah, thank you guys so much for watching today.
Yeah, appreciate it.